Hi everyone, welcome to the visual guide for Anabaseios the Ninth Circle. This is the first of the normal raid encounters made available by patch 6.4 in Final Fantasy XIV, The Dark Throne. If you're worried about getting pulverized by the glut of incoming mechanics, I'm here to spell it out for you. My name is Miztech and I'll be your raid guide. Gluttony's Augur will deal high raid-wide damage, shield and heal as necessary. This cast will also limit the available safe area by the formation of a danger ring around the outer edge of the arena. When the boss casts Ravening, he'll gain the abilities of the souls he eats, allowing him to cast specific abilities during the soul's active time. Fire 3 will target players with large circle markers. The boss will then whisper a word of power, indicated by this large flashing icon across the screen, and power up the corresponding spell. In this first instance, the same fire icons as the players marked as flashed, and the AoE circles around each player will grow to a massive size before exploding. Marked players will need to spread appropriately to avoid overlap, while other players move away to avoid getting hit. Blizzard 3 will form a large room-wide donut AoE. The boss will again whisper a word of power, this time flashing the blizzard icon. This will cause the blizzard AoE donut to grow in size, and players will need to move deep into the boss's hitbox to avoid getting hit. The boss will then cast dual spell, and both the fire markers on players and the blizzard donut will appear. At this point, all players will need to pay careful attention to the power word flash on screen to see which of the two spells will be powered up. If you see blizzard flash, all players will need to move into the donut hole, avoiding extra overlap of the fire markers in the available space. If you see the fire flash, players will have more room to work with within the donut hole, but will still need to avoid overlapping the enlarged fire attacks. Next up, Global Spell will deal high raid-wide damage and apply a 15-second bleed debuff on all players. Healers be ready with their shields and heals. This also marks the end of this particular soul phase. The boss will cast Ravening again, gain the power of a new soul, and begin the next mini phase. ARCHAIC ROCKBREAKER will form a blue knockback circle in the center of the room. Players can pre-position near the edge of it to avoid getting knocked into the danger wall, or use a knockback immunity to avoid it completely. Cracks will then appear on the platform from the center that players will have to pay close attention to. The cracks with light creeping through them will soon explode in wide AoE circles from the ends of them. Players will have to position themselves between these areas to avoid getting hit. As the first set of crack explosions go off, the remaining set of cracks will begin to fill with light. As soon as the first set of explosions go off, the players can then adjust to dodge the second set. ARCHAIC Demolish will target the two healers for stack up. The raid will need to split into two and stack with each healer to share the incoming damage, making sure not to overlap. Another Gluttony's Augur raid-wide blast is followed by Ascendant Fist, targeting the primary target for a heavy-hitting tank buster. Cooldown shield and heal as necessary. The boss will then cast Rear Combination and form a Donut Telegraph, or cast Front Combination with a point-blank AoE Circle Telegraph. The telegraphed attack will always go off first, but is then immediately followed by a massive cleave directly in front or behind of the boss, based on the cast. Players will first have to identify if the combo is rear or front, and then move appropriately to avoid getting hit. At this point, this soul mini-phase ends and the boss casts Ravening again, marking the start of the next soul mini-phase. Charybdis will target players with circle AoE attacks that must be spread to avoid overlapping. These attacks will leave behind puddles that persist for some time. The boss will then cast Beastly Roar, dealing a knockback from the center, while players are targeted with another set of circle markers. To handle this combo, players will need to pre-position themselves to be knocked back away from the puddles to avoid getting extra windburn debuffs. You can also use a knockback immunity during this time. The marked players will also need to ensure to avoid overlapping with others until their attacks resolve. Pulverizing Pounce will target a player for stack up, and the group can collapse onto them to share the incoming damage. Gluttonous Rampage will target both tanks with proximity-based tethers and tank busters. The tanks will need to pull their tethers away from the boss until they turn purple to reduce damage, while also popping appropriate cooldowns. The boss will then leap to each tank, dealing high damage. At the same time, a proximity-based damage marker will appear in the center of the room, and all players will need to move to the edge of the arena to reduce damage. The boss will then cast Comet, and another 3 proximity-based damage markers will appear around the center of the arena. Players will need to identify the quadrant of the platform not targeted by a comet, and move into that area to reduce damage. The comets will fall onto the platform, and the boss will then cast Ecliptic Meteor, dealing lethal damage to anyone not hiding behind an intact comet. Players will have to move behind the comet that does not have any cracks until the cast resolves. This cast will also destroy the cracked comets and cause the remaining comet to begin exploding. Players will need to move away from this area to avoid getting hit. At the same time, the boss is casting Pulverizing Pounce, marking a player for stack up. Stand together to share the incoming damage while dodging the exploding comet. This attack marks the end of this soul mini phase. The boss will cast Ravening again, and you'll notice the mini phases begin to repeat. ICEFLAME Summoning will form 4 ice and fire orbs around the platform platform that will begin to explode in point-blank AoE circles. The boss will flash an ice or fire power-up, and players will need to move away from the empowered spells as they grow in size. The mage soul mechanics from earlier will repeat as well. The boss will cycle through the same soul mini-phases and repeat mechanics until the end of the encounter. If you have any questions or comments, please let me know. Up next, we'll head into the 10th circle. As always, thanks for watching. Till next time.